When I was younger, my brother and I got the opportunity to ride a four-wheeler for the first time. We were so excited. We had seen our friends ride four-wheelers, and we now knew we got the opportunity to do this. So I was a little too young to drive, so my brother drove, and I got on the back and just kind of held on. Well, because of that, the weight distribution wasn't exactly the way it needed to be, and my brother didn't have the strength to fully control that much weight on the four-wheeler. And so we found ourselves going super, super fast, straight for a barbed wire fence, and the handlebars locked up. Well, we smoked a pole connecting the barbed wire fence, and we got all cut up. And I remember running to my mom, crying and freaking out and terrified, saying, "Mom, I almost died." And I remember my brother being like, "Bro, you didn't almost die. You have a little bit of cut on your fingers." And he had these scars all the way across his neck as the barbed wire literally almost did kill him. But I remember thinking, you know what? It's my story, and I tell it the way that I want, so I'm sticking to my story. Now, obviously this seems ridiculous because just because I say I almost died, just because I make the story more dramatic than it actually is, doesn't mean that that's actually what happened. But it reminds me of the concept we talked about last week as we started this devotional series called Defend Your Faith. And what we talked about last week is just because you have a perspective of something doesn't mean that it's actually true. Actually, there was a study done to see how terminology and phrasing and perspective could actually influence what somebody believed about a situation. And so they had these two people that had witnessed a car accident, and a cop walks up to one of the people and says, "How fast was the car going when it smashed into the other car?" And the witness said, "Oh man, it had to be like 70 or 80 miles an hour." He takes the note, he goes and he talks to the next person. It just changes the terminology just a little bit. He says, "How fast was the car going when it bumped into the other car?" Just by simply changing the word smashed to bumped, this witness said, "Oh, it was going like 25 to 30 miles an hour." And it was a study to see how the perspective and terminology used can affect our perspective, which can affect what we believe and affect the reality, even if it's a false reality that we live in. And this is exactly how the enemy tries to manipulate truth, tries to deter our minds from truth. He makes things sound good, makes it sound like a good perspective. And so he by using terminology, and so he uses these good sounding terminology to get people to believe that, hey, what you want to be true can be true, and what I want to be true can be true. Everybody's happy, it can both work. But what we saw last week is this concept of relative truth actually cannot exist. If everything is true, actually nothing can be true. So that's what I want to talk about this week as we expose the cultural code of pluralism. If everything is true, nothing can be true, which means there can only be one truth. We, of course, as believers, believe that Christianity is the only truth. And so we're going to ask the question, if there's only one truth, how do we know that Christianity is the truth? And if Christianity is the truth, what does it mean for all other religions? Well, let's read our family devotional scripture now. John 14:6. Jesus said to him, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." So last week we learned that not everything can be true, and it calls us to ask the question, well, what is truth? This week, now that we know there can only be one truth, we're asking the question, how do we know what the truth is? Christianity itself claims through this scripture that we just read that it is the ultimate truth. And so what are the implications of this? If Jesus says, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father except through me," does it mean that other religions are not true? Does it mean that other faith and belief systems that don't line up with Scripture are not true? And if that's the case, what gives us the right to believe that that's true? What gives us the right to say that we our truth is the truth and everybody else is wrong. Well, to do that, we first have to understand that the Bible is true. We first have to prove the existence of the Bible. And listen, there are so many different historical accounts, scientific accounts, mathematical accounts, all these different areas that prove the Bible. But what I want to do is I want to look at simply just some of these and the overall arching narrative of the proof of the Bible. First off, every single quest that has been set out to disprove Scripture has only found for it to be true. We saw this as an example with Lee Strobel last week, setting out to disprove Christianity and actually coming to the faith. One of the most recent arguments is Noah's Ark, and a lot of people use Noah's Ark and the scientific unlikeliness that a great global flood could happen as disproof of the Bible. Well, even as early as recent as 2025, have we found discoveries that yes, Noah's flood actually did happen. And this is one of the many examples where people set out to disprove Scripture only to find that it must be true. Again, I know that surface level. We can go much deeper into that, and I'd love to, if you want to, come talk to me and we can talk about some of those things. But the point is this: time and time again, the more people try to disprove Scripture, meaningful people, scientific people, smart people, they only find Scripture to end up being true. Now, the logical side of it is we would have to realize that if all of these things are true, the miracles aren't, if all of these things are not true, the miracles that people talk about, the experiences people share, all of these things, that would mean Christianity is this grand conspiracy theory. Now, I know some people love conspiracy theories and the getting into the study of all of that, but here's what you have to understand about a conspiracy theory. All it takes is one individual, just one, to expose the entire theory. This is why conspiracy theories really are not that likely, because the more people involved, the less stability that theory has and the less likely it is to stand. For Christianity to not be true, it means that every single person that's experienced a miracle has had to have made it up and come up with a grand plan to cover it and do an illusion to make it look so. It means that every person that's been raised from the dead throughout history has had to fake their own death and come back to life. Every person that's been healed of sickness, which had to have faked a sickness to be healed. And while I do believe that there are people that maybe don't exactly believe in miracles and think it's fake and they try to fabricate things, and so we do see some kind of people doing this in ways that aren't real just to make it look real, I believe that the likeliness of every single individual ever over all of these thousands of years that have experienced miracles to have this grand conspiracy theory and go along with it just doesn't seem likely, because it would just take one person, and they have incentive. If they had the exposure that Christianity was false, all they could do is claim it and make millions and millions of dollars. But again, time and time again, Christianity is proven to be true. And if Christianity is true, it means that other religions cannot be true. Because Jesus himself said he's the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. What does this mean? Just because you have a devout Muslim, or just because you have a devout Hindu, just because you have a devout anybody with any religion that's sold out for their faith and believes that they are going to a certain place when they die, their heaven, doesn't mean that they're right. I can set my mind and believe that I'm one day going to work for NASA, and I can set out and believe that, but it doesn't mean that it's true. Just because I'm committed, just because I'm dedicated, doesn't mean that it's true. So this is an unfortunate truth that we have to realize. It is our responsibility as Christians to go out and reach those that are lost, to go out and reach those that don't know Jesus. And if they're a part of another religion that doesn't have Jesus at the center and doesn't have Jesus as the way to heaven, they're going to spend eternity separated from Jesus. And this should be a burden for us as Christians to carry. Often it's said, well, why would I bother somebody? Why would I go and and try to lead them away. If they're being successful and doing great things and devout in their religion, why in the world would I try to lead them away from Christianity or from their religion? Why would I want to win them for Christ? Because they can be passionate and good-hearted in pursuing their faith with diligence and be wrong. And they are wrong. And if they're wrong, they're going to spend eternity separated from God forever. Culture teaches that all religions lead to some kind of heaven. And this is just not true. This concept of pluralism, meaning all religions can coexist and they can all lead to heaven, just isn't true. The Bible has been proven true, and Jesus himself in Scripture said that he is the way, the truth, and the life. And no one comes to the Father except through him. If the Bible is true, and we see that it is, that means no other religion can lead to the heaven that is created for us. And if it doesn't lead to the heaven that is created for us, then it leads to the hell separated from God forever. These are important concepts to consider, as not all religions lead to heaven. Christianity is the only one. So let's talk about these things now in our family discussion questions.